For more than a century, the British pound was the most powerful currency on earth. It financed empires, it settled global trade. It was trusted everywhere, from London to Bombay, Cape Town to Hong Kong. And then, it wasn't. Today, the pound survives, but it no longer rules. The currency that replaced it belongs to a country that, for most of history, didn't even have a central bank. So how did Britain lose financial dominance? And how did the United States quietly take over the global money system? This isn't the story of one collapse. It's the story of power, debt, war, and a series of decisions that reshaped the world economy forever. When the pound ruled the world in the 19th century, Britain wasn't just a country. It was the financial center of the planet. London was Wall Street before Wall Street existed. British banks financed railways in Argentina, mines in South Africa, factories in India, and shipping routes across every ocean. And at the center of it all was the British pound sterling. The pound was backed by gold. It was stable, and most importantly, it was trusted. By the late 1800s, over 60% of global trade was settled in pounds. Central banks held sterling as their primary reserve. British government debt was considered the safest asset on earth. This wasn't accidental. Britain controlled the world's largest navy, the most advanced financial markets, the largest empire in history. Money follows power. And Britain had both. At this point, the United States was still a developing nation. Its financial system was fragmented. Its currency wasn't trusted internationally. But history was already shifting. The first cracks in Britain's power, Britain's dominance, rested on one fragile assumption: that it could defend a global empire without destroying its own finances. That assumption collapsed in 1914. World War I changed everything. To fight the war, Britain borrowed heavily, suspended the gold standard, sold overseas assets, accumulated massive debts. For the first time, Britain became a net debtor nation. And who did it borrow from? The United States. By the end of World War I, Britain owed billions to American banks. Gold flowed from Europe to New York. The US emerged as the world's largest creditor. Financial power had started to shift quietly, but Britain wasn't ready to accept that. The fatal mistake returning to gold in 1925, Britain made one of the most consequential financial decisions in modern history. It returned the pound to the gold standard at the old pre-war value. On paper, this looked like strength. In reality, it was economic self-harm. Why? Because Britain's economy had changed. Productivity had declined. Exports were less competitive, wages were higher, debt levels were enormous. By overvaluing the pound, Britain made its goods expensive, and industries collapsed. Unemployment surged. Economic growth stalled. Meanwhile, the US dollar, backed by a booming economy and massive gold reserves, grew stronger. Britain had chained itself to the past, while America was building the future. The Great Depression and the end of illusions. The Great Depression finished what World War I started. In 1931, Britain faced a brutal reality. Gold reserves were draining rapidly. Investors were losing confidence. Maintaining the gold standard was impossible, so Britain did the unthinkable. It abandoned the gold standard. This was a psychological blow as much as a financial one. The pound was no longer the anchor of global stability. Truce shifted not overnight, but permanently. Meanwhile, the United States emerged stronger. Despite the Depression, America retained massive industrial capacity, held most of the world's gold, controlled the largest consumer market. The center of gravity was moving west. World War II. The final transfer of power. World War II didn't just destroy cities. It destroyed Britain's financial independence. To survive, Britain sold off overseas assets, borrowed extensively from the US, became dependent on American industrial output. By 1945, Britain was bankrupt, its empire was collapsing, its currency was fragile. The United States, on the other hand, was stronger than ever. It controlled over 50% of global industrial production, the majority of the world's gold, the financial infrastructure to rebuild the world. This set the stage for one of the most important meetings in financial history. Bretton Woods, the moment America took over in 1944. Representatives from 44 nations met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The goal? rebuild a global financial system. Britain wanted to preserve the pound's role. The US wanted something else. America won. The Bretton Woods system pegged global currencies to the US dollar, pegged the dollar to gold, made the dollar the world's primary reserve currency. The pound was sidelined. Britain no longer set the rules, it followed them. This wasn't conquest by force, it was conquest by finance. The pound's slow decline after the war, Britain faced impossible choices. Rebuild at home, maintain a global role, defend the pound. It couldn't do all three. Repeated devaluations followed, 1949, 1967. Each one chipped away at confidence. Meanwhile, the dollar became embedded in oil trade, global debt markets, international reserves. By the 1970s, the game was over. Even when the US left the gold standard in 1971, the dollar remained dominant. Why? Because by then, the system itself ran on dollars. Why America won, and Britain didn't. It wasn't about intelligence or morality. It was about structure. America had a massive internal market, military protection of trade routes, deep capital markets, political stability, control over global institutions. Britain had war debt, a shrinking empire, an overextended economy. Reserve currencies don't fall because they're bad. They fall because the power behind them fades. The lesson most people miss. The most important lesson isn't about Britain. It's about how financial power really works. Currencies don't dominate forever. Systems change, power shifts, but transitions happen slowly. Then suddenly, the pound didn't collapse in a day. It faded over decades, which raises a question many avoid asking. If this happened once, could it happen again? The story of the pound isn't history, it's a warning. Financial power is never permanent. It must be maintained, defended, and adapted. If you want more stories like this, about money, power, and the decisions that quietly shape our world, subscribe to the channel, because the most important financial events are rarely the loudest ones. They're the ones no one notices, until it's too late.